Well, welcome everyone. Amy and I are super excited to be here with you again to talk about game-changing habits that actually stick and get you the results that you are aiming for. I am Mary Axelson with WeMux Consulting, and I work with individuals and organizations to optimize their performance and the impact that they want to have in the world. And Amy, I will turn it over to you for an introduction, and then we'll jump in and start having a dynamic conversation.
Yeah, so thank you, Mary. And habits is a really big topic for me, and you too, Mary, because that's what the work that we do is we help people in leadership develop healthier habits to get better outcomes at work and home. Um, so it's something that Mary and I deal with all the time. I as a psychologist, encounter people everywhere who are having trouble building habits that actually stay with them, that they can sustain. So it's something we all deal with.
Oh, great. Well, let's start off, Amy, by getting a common understanding of what is a habit. We throw the word around a lot, but we don't necessarily define it. And then what gets in the way for people? Why is it so hard to form a healthy habit?
Sure. So I actually looked this up to get the official Google definition, AI definition. So here it is. A habit is a routine of behavior that is repeated regularly and tends to occur subconsciously. It is a usual way of behaving that a person does often in a regular and repeated manner. So I think
Mhm.
what that comes down to is something that we do consistently as part of our daily routine. And the word subconscious, I think where that comes in is we don't have to think about it too much. If you think about some of the earliest habits we form, like tying our shoes and brushing our teeth, we just know to do it. We don't have to remind ourselves because it's just something we've been doing for so long. And um, that's true of a lot of things that we do in adulthood. And the challenge is some of the habits we have that we do routinely aren't necessarily healthy and we want to stop doing. And we want to start doing things that are healthy, particularly with, how we conduct ourselves to be more efficient, to be more productive in our work. So I think it's harder because there are more distractions. We used to, meeting experts, used to say that it took about 40 days to develop a new habit. And now it's something like how many days? I know Mary and I looked this up recently. It's like 200 and something days. It's almost like 3/4 of a year. And I expect as we become more and more distracted with technology and we go at a faster pace and are trying to take in more and more information, it's going to become even harder to build a habit because habit requires focus and intention, not
Yeah, that's
distraction.
great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I think the other thing is sometimes we think about habits and we attach perfection to it.
Yes.
And I like the part around consistency and continuously forming those habits because I don't know about everybody else, but I'm a work in progress. And, I tell myself all the time, I get to start my day or I get to start my habit over at any point that I want to. So I think we wanted to talk about a proud moment, right? Next,
Yeah.
like a habit that we feel most proud of, and how did we build it? And it's okay if I start, and then maybe
Sure.
you can
Yeah,
share
that would be
one. Or
great.
yeah, and our audience, feel free to engage at any point as well. And as we're going along, if you
Yes.
have a tip or a suggestion or a question, feel free to share in the chat room. All right, so I think calendar management is one of my habits that I'm most proud of and serves me incredibly well. Many years ago, I realized that I was using my calendar only to track my professional life and what I had going on in my professional life. And then somewhere else, I had this other system that had to do with my personal life. And a lot of times what would happen is I would overbook myself. I would miss appointments. I wouldn't give myself enough time to finish, deadlines or achieve my goals. And then I decided several years ago that I'm a whole person. So maybe my calendar should be a whole person and started to book things on my calendar regardless of their context
Mhm.
and why it was making it on my calendar, which also includes any prep time, that I need to be able to complete my work, time for reflection and gather insights, time to do the work that comes out of the meetings that we're in, and then, the actual meetings that I'm involved in. The other thing is I look at my calendar because I'm very visual. So having like I can look at my week or I can look at my month and I can see all the commitments that I have going on all at once and then determine where do I need to make adjustments based on that. So I typically don't like to do, for example, more than two social commitments at night
Mhm.
during the week because I know I'm going to end up feeling more tired or exhausted, and it's going to affect the other things that I want to do. And then being mindful like this also helps me to be more present and energized. So when I show up to a commitment, I'm all in, I'm fully present because I'm managing all aspects of my life in a way that enables me to be fully present. So what's something that you're proud of, Amy,
Well,
that's really stuck for you?
I think when I hear the word proud, often we think, oh, if it's something I'm proud of, it must be huge, like some really
Hmm.
big, hard to establish habit. But I've thought about this, and the habit that I'm most proud of and that's most helpful to me is actually quite easy. And that is at the end of my workday, I put things away, I clean off my desk, so that when I enter my office again the next morning, it looks fresh, it's clean, it's
Mm,
not cluttered, and that is a perfect place from which to start a new day. So I
I
think
love
just
that.
like what you were saying, Mary, in the way that you handle your calendar, doing something like that, it expands to all aspects of your life. So I find that if I don't clean the top of my desk, get rid of anything on the surface, put it away, the next morning, if I open my office door and there's clutter, it immediately impacts my mood and my stress level.
Hmm.
So very
Hmm.
powerful habit that I recommend.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing. I can relate to that as a visual person.
Mm-hmm.
If I walk into a room and there's a lot going on, I immediately feel overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
So I will stack things so they look neat and orderly, even
Right.
if there's a lot of chaos going on in that pile,
Yeah.
because visually it just serves me well. So let's talk about a habit that you tried to build, but it
Sure.
didn't stick, and
Sure.
and why?
Well, I will say, it's taken me years to develop a really good exercise habit. Uh,
Mm,
and I've had a lot of false starts. I think all of us have with trying different things. And one thing I tried many years ago was I decided I was going to get up before work and go work out. And at that time, I had to be at the office at 9 o'clock. I was working in a corporate setting. And I'm not a morning person, but I thought I'm going to train myself to be a
mm,
morning person because I always envied morning people because they all talk about getting so much done before everybody else gets up. So I was getting up early enough to get to the gym by 6, and I hated it, but I kept pushing myself to do it, and finally it became so difficult and I was so angry at myself that I just had to stop and accept, you know what, I am not a morning person. I'm never going to be a morning person. And I think what that brings up for me is that you've got to, when you're building habits, establish routines that are in sync with who you are and your
mm,
own natural rhythms and inclinations. Otherwise, it's not really going to stick.
mhm.
So,
So what
what
did
about
you do?
you?
So what did you do instead?
Well, instead, and as I've said, I've tried a lot of different ways to have an exercise routine. And the best routine I've come up with, it's been since joining this gym a few years ago, where we have small group coaching exercise. So you know that there's 6 of you in the group, and if you don't show up, you will be noticed. Your absence will be noticed. So that helps me know I'm accountable. I have to get there, and it's at a reasonable hour. I get there at 8 or 8:30 in the morning, not 6.
Mhm.
And the other part of that really has been helpful is that this gym I go to has a great sense of community, and I love that aspect. So I never thought I would be saying this, but for the past 3 years since joining this gym, I actually love going to the gym. I actually jump out of bed ready to go. Like I'm
Mhm.
so into it. So I do think that brings up another important part about building a habit. Sometimes being accountable is really helpful, and doing it with other people.
Mm, mm.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
about
I
you?
think, yeah, and I think the other thing that you're saying, I'm just going to call out a little bit more,
Yeah.
it's understanding who you are.
Yes.
Okay. And so stepping into your self-awareness
Yeah.
and trusting it and say, if I want to make a slight change or adjustment, how do I do it in a way that aligns with my strengths, what I value and the type of impact that I want to have. And so I'm on the opposite side of you where I do better in the morning. So if I want to exercise, if I want to do anything creative, if I want to do heavy thinking, if I really want to focus, I know that I have to do all that kind of work earlier in the day. Now, I don't always have the ability to do that. So sometimes I'm doing stuff later afternoon or evening.
Hmm.
But I know that it's going to take me hard. It's going to take me longer and it's going to be harder and it's going to be more exhausting for me when I'm in that time. So I also have to just give myself more grace and space,
Hmm.
understanding when I'm operating in a way that may not necessarily be aligned with those natural strengths. So I walk and exercise in the morning. And the way that I build in accountability is I have walking partners.
Hmm.
And I have walking partners that live in my neighborhood. So if I just want to be spontaneous and we can reach out and contact each other. And then I have walking partners when I want to work and I want to walk in other parts of the city.
Hmm.
Or right now I'm in Maine and it's really cold. And we want to walk inside because it's -5 degrees and icy and snowy. So just figuring out the different environments. The other thing that I discovered during the pandemic, when we weren't able to interact with each other as much, that walking became a really critical way for me to get my social needs met,
Hmm.
to feel connected, to another human being and to be able to provide that support and guidance, new to each other. So walking is much more than the physical aspect of it. It's also meeting my emotional and social needs, as well, and attaches me back to my why and why it's important to me.
Hmm. Yeah, I recall a story from a book on building habits where this guy had a habit of getting up from his desk every day at about 2 and going to the company cafeteria and getting himself a chocolate chip cookie. And he wanted to stop that habit. And he was trying to figure out, like, what is it? Why do I do this? Like, what is it I like so much about getting the chocolate chip cookie? Because it wasn't serving him well to have that. And he realized it wasn't so much the cookie, it was the socializing on his way to get the cookie. He would stop and say hi to people. And so he tried cutting out the cookie and just going with a, 2 o'clock break to socialize. And that
Mm,
worked out much better for him. So
yeah,
I think
that's
it's helpful
great.
sometimes to take apart our habits and ask, why does this appeal? How can I make it healthier? And certainly combining different things that are all appealing in a really positive way, that's a really powerful way to make a habit stick.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think we're kind of leaning a little bit into habit stacking.
Yes.
Right, as a way to build a healthy habit. So, can you share a bit more about what habit stacking is, why
Sure.
people do it and how it helps you?
Sure. So habit stacking, the concept here is if you already have a habit that is going really well, something you're doing consistently, it's a part of your routine already, adding something to that, since you already have the momentum going, just adding one more thing to it. So as an example, and this moves into a habit I'm working on right now, I've mentioned that I have a really good workout habit every morning. And I've really been trying to be more consistent with meditating in the morning. And so rather than say, I'm going to do my meditation at this other time, I have started adding it on to the exercise. So now, my regular routine is exercise, come home, take a shower, have breakfast. Now it's exercise, come home, take a shower, have breakfast, meditate for 10 minutes before I
Mm,
move on to other things.
yeah, I
So
love
it's just
that.
you're just adding on, and you're strengthening all those earlier habits that you've already developed. It's becoming a healthier chunk in the morning, in other words.
Yeah. So how you doing?
Pretty well. I think that, as we already mentioned, it takes almost a year now to develop a habit. And it's hard because I will say one of the bad habits I have that I'm also trying to change is I check my email
Mm.
too early. And that often will throw the meditation. So I will do those things, exercise, shower, eat breakfast. And then I'm thinking, oh, I wonder if I have any emails I need to look at. And instead of just ignoring emails and going right to the meditation, I will go to the email. And then, of course, that wastes time.
Mhm.
And it pulls me off track, and I don't always get to the meditation. So I'm really trying to resist checking email until after the meditation. Not easy.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and that's why we have to remember it takes in a world where we have so many distractions, like email, like text messages, like constant information coming at us. There's a lot of falling off and getting back on. And I'll just give you one example about this. We used to believe earlier when we thought we could change a habit in 40 days that if you sent someone to rehab to overcome addiction, 30 to 40 days would be plenty. But what we know now is that sometimes in order for someone to overcome an addiction, they have to go 2, 3, sometimes 4 times.
Mhm.
So keep that in mind with anything you're trying to develop, with any habit you're trying to stop. You're going to get disrupted either from external curveballs coming at you or from inner situations. Like you might not be feeling well and might not have the stamina that day to develop a new habit. Um, so you start
You're
over.
having me think, Amy, too, about how our brain develops neural pathways, right?
Yes.
Going back to habits and the fact that a habit is when we're in that autopilot, we're not even thinking about it because our brain has developed those neural pathways and we know how to do it. And when you were talking about addiction, it had me think about back when I was in my 20s, I quit smoking.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that smoking was more to me than the actual nicotine. I was attached to smoking for a lot of different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And after smoking for, several years, there were things that my body had gotten used to doing. And so, for example, I would get up in the morning to have a cup of coffee and I'd smoke a cigarette.
Mm-hmm.
My body was used to this like mouth hand movement that would happen throughout the day. If I got upset about something, I would smoke. If I was being social, I was more likely to smoke. So I really had to look at all of those different things
Mm-hmm.
and put a replacement strategy or a replacement action in place to help me kick that habit of smoking cigarettes. And so, for example, we'll just use the hand to mouth motion. I got a water bottle. I walked around with a water bottle wherever I went because then I was still doing that gesture that my body was used to.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't drink coffee for a whole year. I actually think the caffeine withdrawals were worse than the
Yeah.
nicotine withdrawals, but I associated drinking coffee so much with smoking a cigarette that I couldn't drink coffee anymore. I'm back to drinking coffee many years later, and I don't have that association, anymore. I had to
Mm-hmm.
think about when I experienced conflict or I got upset, what was I going to do instead? So I got a journal and I would write, or I would go outside and go for a quick 15-minute walk to help myself process and work through the emotions. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just a really great point that you brought up that sometimes when we're forming new habits,
Mm-hmm.
are we wanting to, change something? It's also about what do we need to let go of
Yes.
and do differently so that we can then create space for this new habit, knowing
Mm-hmm.
that our brain has created neural pathways and that our brain is designed for efficiency and it's going to take us automatically back there.
Right. And I think your example really demonstrates the complexity of habits and how you have to go at habit change from many different angles. So, like with the cigarettes, you can't just say, okay, I'm not going to smoke anymore. You have to set yourself up for success.
Mhm.
You have to try different things to get that effect that the cigarettes were giving you.
Mhm.
And as I'm thinking about smoking, I'm thinking, another really important part of developing habits that stick is, like in that example, you've got to be ready. It's got to be something that you want. I mean, how many people every year decide they're going to give up drinking, or they're going to give up smoking, or they're going to start eating more healthfully only because their doctor tells them to, or they want to please a family member or friend, or they just read a book and they know they need to do this, but they're doing it for someone else. So you can really, 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 really want to do something, but if it's not for you, it won't last.
Yeah, it's great because I go back to the smoking example. I had become a mom
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't want my child to smoke.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, if I don't want my daughter to smoke, then that means I can't be that I need to be a non-smoker. And that became a real motivation for me because being a good mom is incredibly important to me.
Mm-hmm.
So what about our audience? Anything that you'd like to share? A habit that you're working on right now and maybe some mini wins that you're experiencing or an area that you're getting stuck?
Hi, I'll
Hi,
go.
hi, Jillian.
I'm always a work in progress, but
All of
I
us
think
are, Julian.
I mean literally like Amy said, there's so many restarts, and I think it's hard too because I'm in a stage of life where I have kids that still require so much of me. So oftentimes I have to like put my own habits on the back burner, which is not always the best because then I have what like it's like once you get off track, it's really hard to get the train back on the track. So I'm trying to be better about that, but I'm very good like in the morning about like after I drop the kids off from school, taking like whatever it is, 15, 20, 25 minutes, however long it takes me to like get everything in order. So I go upstairs, I make sure like the beds are made, I make sure that like the house isn't a mess. I make sure that the dog has been let out before I sit down because I feel like if I don't do those things, my day gets so much more chaotic or feels so much more chaotic because there's always like a few things in the back of my head that I maybe haven't done. So I feel like I've really made it a habit to like take that 20 minutes or whatever it is to just get the few things done or that might be outstanding, like done so that I can put my full focus on what I need to focus on for the remaining few hours. But I will say something I'm working on is I'm really trying to be better about taking walks. And it makes the most sense for me to do that when the kids are not there, obviously. But it is so hard to find a consistent time that I can do it. The weekends are so much easier. I find myself able to do it on Saturdays, like no problem. But the weekdays, I constantly keep prioritizing something else. And then I'm like, well, now I don't have time for the walk. So I'll just do it tomorrow, which is so I'm trying to be better about it. So that even if I just have like 20 or 30 minutes, just like take a walk, go outside. I have a great neighborhood to walk in and then come back inside and I can like get the day started. So that's my goal for 2025 is to be better about that. Um, I'm also such a weenie about the cold, so that's really not a motivating factor for me right now. Although it's beautiful here today, but in general, it's been bad. So I've been like, we can do that tomorrow.
Mhm.
So I'm going to be better about it. I'm going to try to put that, like, even if I have to put it in my calendar, like Mary said, because I'm trying to be better about that, putting things that are non-work related in the calendar so that I know in my brain that that space is taken up, that time is taken up. So hopefully those things will go together and I'll be better about taking the walks. But I am very good about like sticking to a routine and making sure that things are like done and put away before I focus on something else. And I find that to be a super helpful habit, like very, for me, very productive, makes me much more productive.
That's great, Jillian. And you also gave some good examples of habit stacking as
Yes.
well. So I think before we're getting to like, we only have a few more minutes. Lee, did you want to share something before we?
We have time.
Yeah, yeah, go for it. We'd love it.
I was thinking it's funny how you talk about perfectionism because I'm thinking of all my habits and then I'm like, well, I haven't done that one long enough, or I don't do that one consistently enough. Does that count? But yeah, habit stacking definitely works for me. Two things that I've done is my younger kids take the bus at the same exact time every day, and we have to stand outside. So I take my dog, and my walk happens immediately after they get on the bus. So I just keep it moving. That is really, really consistent because I'm always trying to get them on that bus. So it actually happens. And then I'll listen to something like that I'm excited about, like a podcast or something. And so it makes it pleasurable. The other thing is because I just became self-employed, one of the things I kind of promised to myself was that every day I would do something for myself first thing for my top priority. So from 9 to 9:30, I don't open my email. I just do something that moves what I care about forward. And it's like it's almost something that's empowering to remind me that like I am driving my own life now and I can do that. And that's been really, really powerful for me.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that.
I love
Like,
that too.
yeah, two great examples of habit stacking as well as what brings you joy and what's important to you. So thank you, both of you, for sharing. You also brought up, two great points around distraction. Like, what gets in the way? Like, what gets our attention and then gets in the way of this new habit that we want to form? And many years ago, I read about how the most successful CEOs only check their emails 3 times a day. So in the morning, at lunchtime, and end of day, because they know that emails are constantly coming at us, distract us, get our attention, and then potentially prevent us from doing those things that are most important to us. And so I'm going to share a little bit about distraction and what I'm doing right now to help me with that from a bigger picture perspective. And then maybe Amy, you can share one quick and we'll close it up. So I have a high learning need. So I am always interested and curious about shiny new things. And that can then get in the way for me focusing as much as I need to on the things that are most important to me and what I am committed to. And so gender equity is something that I feel passionate about. It's my world's work. It's work that I do. Amy and I deliver a women's leadership development program together. And I was going into 2025 feeling the desire for that shiny new object, which could easily derail me and take me off to another direction. And I said, okay, I feel so passionate about gender equity. What's something else that I can do that's still in that space, but is different for me and something that I haven't experienced yet that will feed my learning need as well? And so I actually am going to do angel investing, and I researched a firm to work with, and they are committed to female startups, and also with a goal of having 50% of the female startups be women of color. So it hits on the gender equity piece for me, but it also hits on equity in a broader way. So now I'm learning about angel investing. I'm going to pitch presentations. I'm building a whole new network, which is incredibly motivating for me and keeps me focused and aligned on my higher purpose.
Mhm.
Amy, what about you?
Along those lines, every year I look at my life and I ask, oh, how can I be more aligned with my values? And I always look at how can I do volunteer work of some sort. And this year I decided, for the volunteer work I do to be most rewarding, I want to be sitting in less meetings. I want to be actually out there doing hands-on work. So I joined a social justice group and I told them straight up, I don't have time for meetings. But if you want me to attend your events and help out in any way, I'm there. And so I just attended one of their events in honor of Martin Luther King. And I was at an event, and my job was to usher people into a concert. And I love that. It's a whole new way of being out in the world helping people that I hadn't done in a while. And that also serves another need for me, which is, as you said earlier, we have a social need, and it's hard to meet those social needs because a lot of us, like me and like you, Mary, I know, are working at home. So I thought if I shift this around a little bit and start attending actual events rather than Zoom meetings, one more Zoom meeting I don't need, but getting out in the world and hands-on contributing, that's a new habit that I love.
Yeah, that's great, Amy. I love that. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Hopefully we gave you some helpful tips so that you can be more consistent with forming the habits that you want for yourself and bring more joy into your life. And we will see you in a few weeks talking about our next topic. So have a
Yes.
great day.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Mm.